Good afternoon. It's Ralph Bennett again for the Affordable Housing Conference. And I want to welcome you to a panel this afternoon entitled Housing, Budgetary, and Economic Strain of COVID-19, Renters, Property Owners, and Local Government. We heard a good many commitments to programs to assist with these problems this morning. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Frank Demarais, who's DHCA Deputy Director, has managed and developed a broad range of local and national programs in the housing industry since 1979 relating to mortgage loan products and affordable housing development. Prior to joining Montgomery County's DHCA, Frank served as the Home Purchase Assistance Program Manager at the Department of Housing and Community Development in Washington, D.C. He's also held management positions at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So, pleasure to introduce Frank Demarais. Frank, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Ralph, and thank you to the Affordable Housing Conference for another excellent, as Ralph said, very progressively looking conference from the conversations this morning. We're very fortunate this afternoon to have a panel that's going to frame the COVID housing impact issues and responses from the perspectives of our governmental response, how we've adjusted policies and how we're delivering local and federal resources, from the landlord and tenant renter perspective on the disruptions to income and the accumulation of past due rent and where we are and where we're looking forward to resolving that, to the renter and landlord timing issues on the rental assistance and the avoiding eviction actions and court actions, and in looking forward to the recovery phase after we get through the response phase with rental assistance. So our panelists today, I'm going to introduce each of them, or all of them together, and then they'll speak. And after the remarks, we will be taking questions in the chat, and hopefully we can answer the questions as well as interaction between the panel members to explore each of these segments. So our panel today includes Councilmember Andrew Friedson, who serves at District 1, representing the Western and Southwestern Montgomery County, serves on the Planning, Housing, Economic Development, and the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Commitments. For 2 years on the council, he's championed our efforts to add additional funding for affordable housing, for critical transportation projects such as the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel, Bethesda, White Flint Metro Station, Northern Entrance, longtime advocate and volunteer in the community and leading on a number of key issues before and while he's been with the council. We're also joined today by Stacy Spann with the Housing Opportunities Commission, Montgomery County Executive Director. Stacy has served previously as Executive Director of Howard County Housing, where he drafted and implemented the county's affordable housing strategic plan, doubled the size of the housing unit portfolio, engineered that county's first mixed income developments. Currently, he's an adjunct professor, the capstone course of master's program, real estate, University of Maryland, College Park, in the School of Planning, Architecture Planning, Preservation, and a member of professional development faculty for the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Organizations. Stacy broadly addresses policy issues together with the delivery of the services of the Housing Opportunities Commission. Rob Goldman is with us. He is president of Montgomery Housing Partnership, where he has served since 2001, leading on housing policy at both federal and local level issues, recognized expert in affordable housing, and in 2017, he was selected as Practitioner of the Year by the National NeighborWorks Association. So Montgomery County's leadership recognized through the services and person of Rob Goldman. He's been past president and current member of the Housing Association of Nonprofit Housing Developers, HAND, as well as member of the Community Development Network of Maryland, serves on the Urban Land Institute, Washington Initiative, Washington Housing Initiative Council, and the Maryland Suburban Growth Commission. We're also joined by Will Roberts, who's currently acting vice president for democracy and government reform at the Center for American Progress. Formerly, he served as a legislative director and chief counsel for Congressman Jamie Raskin. He's an attorney and a community leader, serving in various capacities in the county, including as chair of the board of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance, chair of the Up County Citizens Advisory Board, and is a member of the Manna Food Center Advocacy Task Force. And we're going to have each of our panelists speak in the order of the introduction, starting with Council Member Andrew Friedson.
Thank you so much, Frank. It is so great to be here with everybody and to be amongst friends and colleagues talking about housing. It's a welcome relief to not be talking about vaccines or COVID transmission rates. But we are talking about a crisis in housing that we have that isn't new, that has been exacerbated by the COVID crisis, but is not new. I've said a lot that the only thing novel about the coronavirus is the coronavirus itself. Everything else, it's taken existing challenges and gaps and blown them wide open. And I think there are a few examples. Food security might be one of them, income inequality, racial disparities, health disparities, educational disparities. But housing is really chief among them, issues that already existed in the community, particularly in ours, that has just been dramatically increased as a result of COVID, but isn't new. These issues certainly are not new. I'm really proud of how we've stepped up to meet this crisis at every level. We've needed federal support, we've needed state support, and we've certainly stepped up at the county level, and that has dramatically improved in recent months in particular. But I'm also proud of the fact that we have been working on these issues for years. This isn't something that we showed up to and realized was a challenge because of COVID or during COVID, but certainly the COVID crisis has really put a spotlight on how many vulnerable residents we have and how tenuous our housing stock really is in terms of the ability for residents to be able to afford to live here. We really have a two-pronged approach at the county. We had the rental assistance relief programs trying to provide financial assistance, and then we have some of the regulatory and legal protections, including eviction moratorium. Some of those have been coming down from the state. Some of them we've been advocating from the state, some of which we've asked for more from the state, but several of which have been done at the county level. In terms of relief funding, we've provided $2 million for eviction prevention early on in the crisis about a year ago, $20 million in COVID rent relief to start out for renter support. We added $31 million in renter relief through federal funding, $28 million in additional that's on its way, and another $33 million potentially behind that. So we're talking about tens of millions of dollars that we're providing at the county level through many of the partners on this call and on this this panel to be able to reach renters who we know are at risk of being in significant arrears and potentially ultimately losing their housing. We know that there is a looming crisis ahead of us as well. And we're trying to get out ahead of that and help as many residents as we can. I do think it's important that, to me, addressing this crisis isn't just about, addressing the current symptoms of it. It's about, going after the root causes. And that is the fact that we simply don't have nearly enough housing for the people who need it in Montgomery County. We have been too slow to build housing units in Montgomery County, too resistant to build housing units. We've had a culture where we viewed new residents and new housing projects and developments as burdens, as opposed to blessings of new talent and new energy and new communities. I think that's changing, and I think we've done a lot of work with that. I led the effort in the first budget on the council to add $5 million to the Housing Initiative Fund as our new baseline. And I'm pleased that the county executive and the council are now in full agreement that that is our base, that is our floor, that is the new minimum expectation, maintenance of effort that we expect to invest in our housing opportunities from a county perspective. Working with the county executive and Frank and others, we've put forward a number of different programs. The Fed committee, in particular, the Planning Housing Economic Development Committee, has a new $50 million housing opportunity fund that we've been working with Stacy, Spann, and his team at HOC for that to leverage $50 million to accelerate their housing stock to try to dwindle down their, Stacy will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think their waiting list. I won't even say the number. It's a very high number. I'll let him update you because it always seems to change, but is fairly stubborn. And we're working on a number of different programs for both funds and policies to work with organizations like Rob Goldman's and other nonprofit partners. Between HOC and our nonprofit partners are our single most important tools to providing nonprofit affordable housing and public affordable housing, and the public-private partnerships that both do really are the key to our success. Just to give a quick sense, in the 80s, the average new housing that we were building was 7,100 new housing units a year across that decade. That's when I grew up and was born in Montgomery County. In the 90s, that was cut virtually in half to 3,900. In the 2000s, it was literally cut in half from the 80s to 3,600 units a year. And last decade, it was 2,700 units on average a year. We simply aren't building enough housing to keep up with our need for housing. And so when we wonder and have these questions about why there are massive upsells in the residential housing market during a crisis like the one we're in, it's because there are too many people who want not enough housing. And we've got to address that. We've got to be honest about that. We've got to be serious and sober about that. It's got to be an all-in and not or approach. Yes, preservation is important, but we cannot solve the housing crisis without producing a lot more housing units. I think we've begun to do that. We have passed the growth and infrastructure policy, formerly known as the SSP, the subdivision staging policy. As a council, is the single most pro-housing SSP ever in the history of the county. I'm really proud of the fact that I served on the two committees that deal with that policy, the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee and the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. It dramatically lowered impact taxes, which is a tax on new residents, to make us more competitive in the region and to align better with our smart growth policy goals and our housing targets. Created desired growth areas, which really focus on our transit access in housing, encourage housing in the most sustainable places, including really incentivizing the Purple Line areas. And perhaps most notably, it eliminated the backwards policy of the school-based moratorium, which created a perverse disincentive to build the housing that we needed by basically blaming new residents for challenges that we have created as existing residents in Montgomery County. We have done a number of things on our master plans, including increasing density in just about every master plan that we have done as appropriate in coordination with the planning department and with community stakeholders. We've created incentives at Metro-owned properties to try to create high-rise housing there. And we've done a number of other areas. I think this has been, perhaps the most pro-housing county council in the history of the county. All of our colleagues are very much prioritizing this key issue. I think that the politics of the county have changed, but ultimately, we want to avoid the next crisis that we're in for it to create the exponential crisis that it has. But we also have to recognize that even in non-pandemic moments, we are in a crisis, and it's an affordable housing crisis. It's a housing access crisis. The fact that not enough of our residents can afford to purchase a home here and can afford to rent here without being housing burdened. And all the folks on this call are a big part of the solution, and we've got a lot of work to do, but I think we've made a lot of progress over the last few years in particular.
Thank you very much, council member. And now Stacy's going to pick up the ball that you handed off.
Yeah, I just feel like, well, first off, good afternoon, Affordable Housing Conference in Montgomery County. Frank, thanks so much for that overly generous introduction, probably the most you've said about me in a public setting in some time. Councilmember Friedson is dead on, and I really made me feel like I should just yield my time to questions. I will say that while I agree that we've done and really yeoman's work and moving the challenge forward and addressing the challenge and meeting the moment, that it's important to recognize a couple things, and it's not simply because real estate is affordable. I mean, that we all benefit from the fact that people want to live in this area, and they're breaking their necks to do it. And some folks are moving themselves to the point of financial ruin to do it. We're seeing folks, more and more people paying well above 30% of their gross income for housing costs. And what the pandemic really showed us was, yes, there are disparities. We all know that those disparities have existed. It just laid bare the sort of notion that those disparities are simply about trickle down or rising tides. And in particular, what we saw at the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County was for those folks who are voucher holders, all right, who are already precariously housed without that very important federal subsidy, saw a 13% in interim recertifications. And what that really translated to regular nomenclature, it basically means that people needed 13% more or additional funding in order to make their rent work, right? And so that is a jobs issue. That is a basic universal income issue. It's not simply that the real estate's affordable. It is also that folks aren't being paid well enough to live here and keep pace with the cost. In addition to that, we're running rent arrearage. And look, I think, and our board of commissioners was out front before anybody else with the eviction moratorium. We believe in that. We think we must keep people housed. But as we disaggregate the data, what we found was that folks who are at very low and extremely low, we saw about a 31 percentage point of our entire total tenant arrearage was for very low and extremely low persons. And another 36% was for low income, just low, okay? But what was most surprising was that a full 31% was attributed to folks who are at market. So folks who are making enough at time of application and time of move-in succumb to the tumult of our economy. They needed help. Every agency, every governmental representative on the call on this session is about providing that help. But what it also points to is how precarious our financial fabric is. That folks who are at market rate would need that 31% of our total arrearage. And everyone believes that Housing Opportunities Commission, we only serve folks who are at low or very low income, that this is housing of last resort. It is not. We serve the full spectrum of folks who need to be housed in this county. And so the level of concern that I have when we're starting to see a significant number of folks who are at market lose jobs, lose opportunities, be part of the actual rental arrearage, is extremely high. It's extraordinarily high. And what it points to is that there are some fundamental challenges around income equality, job opportunity equality, and quite frankly, the level of wage that we're paying folks who are living here or trying to live here in Montgomery County. And so I'm gonna yield the couple seconds that I have left to Mr. Robert Goldman, because I'm sure he's gonna have something to wow us.
There you go, Rob. You're up now.
Okay, thanks, Stacy, and thanks, Frank. Appreciate everyone's comments, and I think all of you, what's been said up to date is right on point. I think it's just one of the things I think when we think about the affordable housing industry and the nonprofit housing developers and the developers like HOC and others, is just our commitment is more than just the housing. And so I think what we saw here with this pandemic is that, you know, for example, MHP, and I know Stacy did a similar thing. You know, we as soon as things hit, we set aside staff. We tried to help residents and reached out to residents. For us, we were, food what became a huge issue right off the bat, and starting to connect with other food providers to do food distributions. We actually had a teacher at one of our elementary school collect money so that every week she could provide 100 bags of food to the residents at the school from where the kids go to school at one of our properties. We have these programs. I think Andrew mentioned. We have all this assistance. We had the federal government, the county and state government. But how does the rubber hit? When the rubber hits the road, it's one thing when the things are passed, but then how do residents connect with that, right? So just unemployment assistance. Residents struggled to get signed up for rental assistance, and we were helping residents every which way. And there was sort of the assumption, oh, they've got rental unemployment, they'll be fine. Many families weren't eligible for it. We literally had to call state. Every time there was a problem, we had to call a state senator to call on the residents' behalf, because that was the only way to get their attention. Rental assistance. It's a struggle. The residents are struggling to meet all these sort of requirements of paperwork and other things, income certifications and other certifications. And so again, we sort of had to reach out to residents in a very proactive way to make sure that they understood how to sign up. They didn't get discouraged, and we got them signed up. And then the federal government has the stimulus checks. Well, you had to have filed your taxes, and so it was making sure that whatever tax issues were problems for the residents, we worked through all those issues. So there's a lot that goes on, and from the day that the policies are passed to the days that the money is actually received or the benefit is received in the resident's hand. Couple other things I'll note. And the other thing we did and partner with the county was on testing and vaccines. And I think one of the things we came away from this whole experience is that affordable housing sites are an unbelievable opportunity for the government to provide services. The low-income families live at our sites, and instead of having everyone schlep over to Rockville to go, sign up for this or sign up for that, why not bring the services to where the people are? We have community centers, we have large areas where people can gather outside, and so I think one takeaway from all this will be, how can we continue to have the government partnering with the affordable housing properties and the owners and the providers so that services can be brought directly to the resident. We have been doing on behalf of the county a rental survey, a delinquency survey to see how things have been, and it's been, I would say about 10% across. This was market rate and affordable properties. Affordable properties saw a bigger hit, maybe 4 to 5% higher, and small owners of properties less than 40 units. Also saw a much higher delinquency, or seen a much higher delinquency than the general. Two other things I'll just mention as we think about crises. One is just communication, and I want to give a shout out to Frank and DHCA. They've met with, when the crisis first hit, they were meeting with members of the Montgomery Housing Alliance once a week. We've now backed that down to once every 2 weeks. county executive has met with the MHA initially once every 2 weeks, and now we've backed it down to every 3 weeks. But communication is so important, and it's just so that the policymakers understand what we are actually seeing with the residents, and they can, sometimes we make assumptions. So similar to what Stacy was saying, we have an assumption that all market rate people are doing fine. They're working from home and whatever, and that may not be the case. And we've got to bring that data to the policymakers so that they can shape the policies as it goes forward. And so advocacy is also critical. We're not just providers. We got to get that information to the policymakers. And the last thing I'll mention is, as we go forward, Andrew was listing a list of wonderful things that the council has done, and really applaud Andrew's leadership, getting more money into the Housing Initiative Fund. Two things that we are now working on. We were happy to see that HOC was awarded $50 million through a bond. We trying to get another $50 million sort of for the nonprofit. I got to put my plug in while Andrew's here, and we have an audience, but we're trying to get the next $50 million to a broader group of providers, and we look forward to working with the council. Andrew's been very helpful, meeting with us as well as Hans Riemer on that. And then the last thing is we've had some issues over the last few years around pilots, payment in lieu of taxes, and want to get sort of a reset the policy there and really provide. Most jurisdictions around the country that are supporting affordable housing have a robust pilot program, and want to make sure that Montgomery County's is in line with that, and really in line with what it was doing in the past. Somehow got off course a little, so just need to make a few tweaks to bring it back to the way it needs to be. So, we're always working, and the needs of the county are immense, and it's really about bringing people together and making it all happen. So I'll leave it, pass the baton to William, who's been very very aggressive and doing an amazing job in terms of advocating for tenants, and as well as much more in the community. So take it away.
Well, thanks for that, Robin. Thanks, everyone. Happy to join you all, and sorry for hopping on and off camera if that was distracting. My daughter is here in the side here having lunch, and then my wife just came home, so she was very excited. So we had 15 seconds where if you had passed it to me 15 seconds earlier, you would have heard a lot of mommy. So anyway, good to see you all. I'm Will Roberts. As Rob said, I'm the chair of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. And for folks who don't know us, we're the first and really only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to the education, advocacy, and organizing of tenants. And, as you said, been doing a lot, certainly pre-COVID, because as has been expressed all day, not just in this panel, but our affordable housing crisis and affordable rental housing crisis was not created by COVID. It was exacerbated by it, but certainly existed well before. And so we have been working for a number of years as an alliance of about 30 nonprofit, labor, religious, political, civic, and other organizations, as well as with organizations across the state. We're a co-founder of a partnership called Renters United Maryland that has been really active in years past, but was really active this year in advocating in Annapolis for some of the things that tenants, not just in Montgomery County, but across the state, really needed. And so we know it's been quite a year plus. It's been quite the stretch. And the crisis that we see being exacerbated by COVID is really hitting hard. Here, we know across the state, there are about 200,000 plus evictions that are going to start hitting. And in Montgomery County, that could mean 20 to 30,000 of those could be right here at home. And eviction is a disaster for any family under regular circumstances. While we are making progress in the pandemic, but we're still in a pandemic, and so eviction during a pandemic is even a worse crisis, if you can have a worse crisis. And we know from the data that that crisis is disproportionately hitting renters of color, low-income folks that are otherwise vulnerable. And so that is, the environment in which we find ourselves and are doing this work. And, just want to note, as, although we're talking about what's happening in Montgomery County, but in the state context, General Assembly session just ended a few weeks ago. And unfortunately, the General Assembly neglected to pass some of the really significant emergency renter protection legislation that was on the table this session. There were some 20 or so bills, including a major renter protection package put forth by Montgomery County delegates Janelle Wilkins, and work done by Delegate Vaughn Stewart, who are both Montgomery County delegates and also happen to be Renters Alliance board members. But tenant advocates in Annapolis were trying hard to sort of lay out the guardrails in the midst of COVID of what people needed to get through or to get by in this pandemic. And unfortunately, say nothing of Governor Hogan's lack of support for it, but the General Assembly was unable to get it done. And so folks are now going to be looking to state and local authorities to be able to use some of the funding streams that we heard talked about this morning from our federal delegation, and some of the flexibility that we heard talked about, frankly, to be able to target some of the aid toward the need. And so, since last week or thereabouts here in Montgomery County, because the eviction court is open. And so there are about 4,000 or so, probably more actually, eviction filings that we've seen here locally. And while a lot of those have been dismissed, a significant number, pretty disturbingly, are judgments against tenants who don't show up in court for various reasons. But when you get the situation where tenants are in court in the courtroom for an eviction hearing, it's often too late. And so unfortunately for a lot of those tenants that aren't showing up, that are getting judgments against them, and a lot of those people are simply folks who have not yet received the relief to be able to pay their rent. So you've heard people talk about this all day, about matching up some of the affirmative defenses. We can debate whether or not the state moratorium is an actual moratorium, or if it's just an affirmative defense. But matching up some of the protections that are out there that are designed to give renters more time to be able to get that infusion of relief. And so we're seeing people missing that window, unfortunately. And as I said, for those folks who would otherwise qualify for those protections via the state or federal orders, we're also seeing some landlords, filing for evictions and then, notifying tenants that they're not going to renew their leases, simply just deciding to convert folks to month to month in order to keep the option open of filing what's called tenant holding over procedure, which we can talk about a little bit perhaps in the question and answer. But basically, there's a glut of these THO cases going on across the state, and it's a way that some landlords or private landlords are unscrupulously getting around some of these state-ordered protections, because there's no requirement for a landlord to state the reason not to renew. And just cause eviction is an issue that we've been working on. We can talk about that also. But there's a huge issue going on across the state and impacting us here locally. And the Public Justice Center estimates that there's been an increase of about 132% of tenant holding over eviction filings, which shows us just how far the door has been kicked in by some of these, and it's not, all landlords, but folks who are acting irresponsibly, to circumvent, as I said, those protections designed to keep people safe in their homes, stable in their homes, but also to prevent virus spread. Again, still in the middle of a pandemic, even though we're, trying to get through it. And so, as I said, we're in a situation where renters and advocates are, looking to turn into our county government to try to address the eviction crisis by doing some of what's been done already, providing the millions in rental subsidies and support for legal aid. And we strongly support that effort for sure. We strongly support people showing up to sort of to put out the fire, to quell the emergency. But one of our sort of chief philosophies in doing this work, and how we see one of the best ways forward to help tenants stuck in this cycle and in this danger of eviction, is to get to people early. And so we advocate, and part of what we do is early direct outreach and personal guidance to renters, so that they can be able to take advantage of available resources, exercise their rights, negotiate for their housing options before they enter the eviction pipeline. We think the worst place for a tenant to learn about their rights and learn about what protections they might have had is when they're in eviction court or when they're in the eviction pipeline. And so, we continue to advocate for the county and for organizations like ours to be able to work together to do everything that we can to sort of keep people out of that. And again, the county has been able to, under some of the flexibility of those federal funds, provide provide the means for organizations on the ground to be able to link up with tenants and provide those informations for how to get into systems. Our organization does weekly or bi-weekly town halls with Frank and his team and folks from the county. And so, we're out there trying to pull in as many people as we can. But it's only going to get harder because the crisis persists. And so, I know that, as we said, the two tranches of federal money, we're waiting on the second, but, we are anxious, and love to talk about this also, anxious to see the county exercise the flexibility in that money, not just to provide aid to renters, to renters who are in the eviction pipeline, but again, to try to get to people early. So that's where we are, and that's where a lot of tenants find themselves. So we, I think that's why this work is super critical, and happy to be here with you all talking about how we can help keep people in their homes.
Thank you very much, Will. I put in the chat list that participants are welcome to put questions into the chat. I haven't seen any entered, so I thought I'd open it up here to the panelists to probe each other, to raise questions that you think we need to flesh out a little bit more. Anything that you think that needs to be shared.
Well, one thing I'll say in follow up to William, in a sense, we have a crisis. We're in a crisis, and we think we have all this money, but that money is going to go, relatively quick. And some of the money, the rental assistance is for 12, I think maybe 15 months of rental assistance. And we've been in this crisis for over 12 months.
Right.
So, and the state program actually gave monthly rent assistance, and basically in a couple months now, that money's going to be gone, and they won't be eligible for that money anymore. And so, and it doesn't look like, I don't see the federal government. Maybe they come back and become aware, but they're struggling with the infrastructure bill. They're on to other things, and they think they've solved the problem. But, and yes, mask mandates are seeming to go away, but at the same time, it's not clear that people are going to get their jobs back anytime soon. And what the time frame for people, how long will this stretch out, especially for people in some of the service industries and the type of jobs that many of the people who live in affordable housing and other places. So we need to be always thinking ahead, and that's something I'm really I'm happy the federal government did what they did. It was a godsend. There was no way the county was going to have the resources to do at that level, and so we needed the federal help, and it took a lot to get there, but we're not, it's not over, and so need to be thinking about that.
Well, it's not over by a long shot, Rob. I mean, you've got arrearage. We've got arrearage at HOC, and that, I mean, we're not even talking about what happens as we careen into the fall. And I think one of the things that has to be lifted up around flexibility, I'll thank Will for saying this, is that we have to consider for those nonprofits and quasi-governmental organizations that are in fact continuing to avoid the court system, keeping folks housed, have imposed for and will impose for some significant period of time rent moratoria to ensure that families aren't in the street. We've got to ensure that they can access directly those rental assistance funds. And Rob pointed out much earlier that to ask a family in crisis, and be clear, Councilmember Friedson noted that families are enduring multiple crises at the same time during this whole time period. But to ask a family and enduring multiple crises, having to deal with educating school kids and coordinating all of that stuff and looking for work and on and on and on and on, to locate all of these documents when the federal government doesn't even ask you to do that. It's reckless, right? It's inefficient. It causes more panic, right? And then those nonprofit housers, those quasi-governmental housers, are looking at their reserves dwindling rapidly and scratching their heads trying to figure out what they're going to do. But they can't access the court system. They won't access the court system. And by the way, not particularly helpful because we're putting hundreds, thousands of families in significant jeopardy when we could avoid it just because those organizations can certify who those renters are, what the level of arrearage is, and then work to capture all of the approvals from customers. So we have to actually figure out how to take down the temperature on the crisis that's looming at home. Yes, it's great that vaccinations are getting out there, right? I'm all for that. I'm vaccinated, right? Great that we're finally testing in low-income communities. When are we going to keep people housed? When are we going to actually remedy the situation that, quite frankly, is right in front of us, and we've got resources to do it? We can't starve folks out until the last moment, because what we're going to start is a series of midnight flights where folks are doubling and tripling up and causing additional harm to themselves, neighbors, family, community, etc.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think, Stacy and Rob is housing and service providers, and I say housing and service providers to Rob's point earlier that our affordable housing and public housing authorities aren't just providing units for people. They're connecting people not just to homes, but to services that they need, that their families need, and we need to do a better job of partnering. And then, Will, obviously, who's an advocate and a partner with a lot of folks who are going through some of the most challenging circumstances. But we've allocated, we have basically almost $60 million in county funds for renter support, but it's taken us a long time to get that money out. And Stacy raises the issue of the administrative burdens that we're putting on them. Some of them were required by the federal government that we needed to clean those up. Some of them are just because we're not set up to do things as quickly as we needed to do them in the moment that we were in, facing the crisis that we currently have. But we need to do better on that. And we have about $61 million additionally, the 31 million that is on its way, and the 28 million beyond that. And we're gonna have to get that money out a lot faster to folks who need it, because, you know, oftentimes, and this has been true in a lot of grant programs, not just in Montgomery County, but throughout the region and the country, you know, the money doesn't help if it comes too late, you know, and it doesn't help to relieve the other impacts based on those other crises, the stress, the health disparities, the food on the table, the decisions that you have to make about work and career, and sacrifices that you're making because you don't know what is going to happen with your housing. We have to provide more certainty, and we have to provide greater efficiency and clarity in a lot of these programs. And, you know, we're doing as best as we can. A lot of people are working really hard day and night, but I think all of us can do better. I think we learned a lot over the last year of what worked, what didn't work, and we've, you know, tried to improve those processes. And I think that we're going to do a lot better with this next round of funding. But, you know, certainly we have seen the challenges that we have had. We need to lower the burdens as much as possible so that we're not, in our greatest attempt to help people, we're hurting the very people we're trying to help by making the burdens too difficult, thinking that we're restricting the money to the people who need it the most, not realizing that those are the very restrictions that are cutting off access to those very people we're trying to serve. And I think we're navigating through that, but we need to do better.
Let me just step in, because we did get a couple of questions in the chat, and they actually connect to some of that conversation, just relative to moving the money. You know, as the numbers add up to the new, you know, calendar year 21 with the new federal money, it's going to be well over $90 million. One of the state, the application systems are open, that they are, you know, processing over 4,500 applications in steady stream. You know, Stacy speaks to the documentation standards, which have been aligned with the source of funds. State put some requirements on it. The Treasury put them on. They're trying to get the word out that, you know, tenants can apply and should apply and submit documents available. Then they go case by case, but it is case by case on 4,500 cases and counting. So we'll easily see double or triple that as we move forward. But the money is, at this point, first checks are starting to go out, they believe, by the end of May, and it opened up the second week of April. And so the process is, as I just said, moving as best it can. There's one question about, is there a way to advocate for the suspending, staying of eviction proceedings? Advocacy has been done on that. The county executive with other jurisdictions, together with affordable housing organizations, have petitioned the governor to extend his executive order. The CDC order will expire June 30. The judge that made a decision in the District of Columbia has stayed that pending appeal, which is going to push that out, that case out at least to June 30. So June 30 for the federal, but if the governor extended his protections, we could buy some more time for those tenants to show up in court and get the application money out. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on those two.
Can I just jump in on that real quick, Frank? Just because it's so important. I mean, you know, all of us, wherever we fall on some of the other policy issues involved in the affordable housing discussion on, I'm so sorry, my phone is ringing, you might have heard it. But all of us need to be banging down Larry Hogan's door realistically, because this is hurting all jurisdictions across the state. And it's something that was easy to do at any time, not just while the legislature was in session and they were putting forth different proposals before him, but it's something that he clearly has the authority to do and should do, you know, for at least, you know, another, you know, 6 months or so, if not more. You know, we have some of the other programs that are in place here locally, although not eviction prevention, but there's, you know, the legislation that the council put in place, that Councilmember Jawando led on, capping, you know, rent increases, for instance. We sort of need all of these things on the table, because, as has been mentioned by Stacy and others, this is going to keep going on. And so, you know, we really need all the tools at the disposal, because the money, the time frame for the money will run out. And certainly that will, other people will be able to get into the pipeline, because that, to be honest, although it was robust funding, we know that it was not enough funding to help everybody. And so we just really need to continue to push for all of those things to be on the table. And if I could, and you might be going this way with another question, but like, we also need to like bear in mind that this is why we have to have a holistic view of how we move forward on our affordable housing future in the county, right? Like we can't be certainly afraid to talk about redevelopment and building of additional units. We can't be afraid to talk about what stabilization might look like and how that could be part of the conversation. I'm not trying to start a fight here, but I just think that if we're going to like have an actual conversation about holistically how we move things forward, that we have to have like a real conversation about everything on the table. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I agree. I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
I was just going to chime in on that one thing you said about the staying of evictions. Montgomery Housing Alliance with CDN did a statewide letter with, I think, over 130 nonprofit organizations calling for the governor to do a complete moratorium on evictions and for a targeted 90 to 120 days so this money can get out. They're moving forward. The courts have been moving forward in something called the rocket docket, which sounds ridiculous, but they're basically pushing all these cases through. And there's no time, as Stacy said, the money hasn't come out, and so here all these people are being evicted, and because they're not showing up, as Will said, so they're not showing up. There's automatic evictions. The CDC guideline moratorium, if you get it, you can write a letter, attestation saying you've been impacted. The problem is that's going to expire. The governor's order requires you to go into court and at least with the CDC order, you can give the sheriff the letter and he would stop the eviction if you didn't get to court. But you can't do that with the governor's moratorium. And so we need not just the governor extend it, we need him to make a complete moratorium for 90 to 100 days at least, just so the money can get out to the people who are applying for it. And let's see, and to me, it's in the landlord's interest too to be, see what you can get from this system. But right now they just don't know, there's a lot of uncertainty. They don't know if their tenants are going to get the assistance. Their tenant is up for on the docket. If they pull their tenant from the docket, then they got to start the whole process over again, and that's a risk to them. So the easiest thing to do is to put this complete moratorium down for a limited period of time so money can get out. I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but what I will say is, there have to be multiple efforts at the same time. And so there's a question in the chat box about the homeless system beefing up. Well, why do we need to get to the homeless system, right? Mission one is to keep people housed. And so, yes, we have all of the criteria from the funding source. That's great. But there's not a single criteria that says that MHP or HOC can't apply on behalf of its thousands of customers who are facing arrearage, and there has to be some sort of validation process. There has to be an audit function. Sure, got that. All right, but you can put the onus on us as a federally funded. We're already federally funded partially, but federally funded organization. That will vet it, will meet the criteria, not the income criteria, and I'll talk about that in a second, but we'll meet the criteria for rental assistance. And if we take a nickel of it, then we're going to stop our eviction action. That should be for every landlord, right? So if the way to get landlords to actually have a stake in the thing is to let them actually have a stake in it. This notion that folks for whom English is a fourth or fifth language, right, are going to be running around trying to access a website that is difficult for folks with advanced degrees to use it's crazy talk. But we can do better than this. It's not that hard. We're making it more difficult because we're afraid of some box checking exercise, and we're not actually stepping back and recognizing that the billions of dollars that have gone out. Right? Yes, there will be a reckoning. Yes, there will be an audit. However, the fact of the matter is, fraud's going to be somewhere in the 2% range. So we built this whole thing trying to prevent fraud when folks are actually at the point of desperation. That's point one. And we really must do better than that. We can actually meet that challenge.
I'm just going to step in with just a time check. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes remaining. We will end at 1 o'clock. And then for the other participants, there will be a 15-minute break in the program before the next session start. We got a couple more minutes.
My last point
So
was that
there's a couple of comments in the chat. First of all, I totally agree. And I've tried to advocate throughout the crisis that we should be partnering with landlords and requiring that landlords make concessions. And the money is best suited to go through those that we can reach many people as opposed to doing it individually. I mean, it's just a much more efficient way to do it. And certainly our large affordable housing providers are the best example of this, because we know that they have significant amount of needs and they're already, our county partners. I think we ought to be doing more of that. And I think it's true, not just on, if you take a nickel of the money, you agree to not do evictions. I think that's certainly part of it, but also if you're getting some money towards the rent that is owed on your unit or units, then you're forgive the balance. And what is the magic split on that? There's an agreement, but there are deals. It's basically a settlement where you're settling up, and and it could be uncollectible money or uncollectible for a period of time. There's an incentive to a landlord to accept that, and there's obviously a significant benefit to a tenant to not be in a situation where you can't get evicted for a period of time, but you're mounting your debt to a point that you'll never be able to repay it. And so the moment the protection goes away, and eventually it will in some way, in some form or fashion, then you are put in a position where you're delaying an inevitable horrible situation for everybody. We can do that. There are programs that do that, and I think we should be doing more of it. And I think the comment in the chat about that, I think by Sherry, is absolutely right on that. In terms of Mary, I agree with you, Stacy, that we shouldn't be relying on the homeless support structure on this. We should be getting out ahead of that. That's waiting too long to treat. That's waiting till you're sick to treat yourself in healthcare, as opposed to preventative treatment. And the preventative treatment is dealing with housing on the front end and making sure that people don't lose their homes and aren't left out on the street. But we are beefing up our support structure as a safety net as well. We've done a lot of work on that over the last year. The good news is actually our homeless numbers are down, not up, which is a great relief, but that's for right now. And we recognize that could be a tenuous situation. We continue to work with our homeless support community providers, both the nonprofits and the shelter providers, to address that. In terms of Scott, your question about the county, effectively putting people outside of courtrooms to provide information, education, and assistance. I can't say that we're quite doing that, but we have, working with the executive branch and the council, we have really beefed up our support for renters. The Renters Alliance is part of this effort in their education outreach efforts, but legal aid and other organizations are a big part of it. And we did shift the focus in terms of renter support during the crisis, recognizing that it was less about organizing and more about legal protections and all the different changes and the confusing nature of governor's orders and federal restrictions and county rules, and making sure that folks understand and are educated with that. So we've really beefed up those efforts, working with community partners like Will and his colleagues, but also many others, because a lot of different groups have a lot of unique core competencies, and they also reach unique communities. There's not one group that reaches the entire county. There are a lot of different groups that reach different communities well, and I think we've tried our best. We certainly could do more, but we've tried our best to partner with those organizations in order to do that.
And we have reached our 1 o'clock, so I apologize that we are not going to get to all the questions, but I think we covered the substance of most of them. So I'm going to just step in and say thank you very much to our panel. Thank you to the participants. And that there are a lot of topics here that I'm sure all of us here on the panel will be working together to continue to try and resolve. So with that, we'll say thank you very much and turn this back over to the Affordable Housing Conference for whatever the process next step is.
Thank you all. It was a terrific session. We have to make sure many people see it. Have a good afternoon. We'll see you at the next session.
Okay. See you guys. Good job.
Thanks, everyone.